I'm Amanda Weber, and I would like to welcome you on behalf of Westminster Presbyterian Church in downtown Minneapolis.
I'm Gia Johnson, and I'd like to welcome you on behalf of McCormick Theological Seminary's Solidarity Building Initiative.
Westminster and McCormick are coming together to present Isolation in Perspective:
Criminal Justice, Disconnection, and the Church. This multi-week educational series seeks to explore the impact of COVID-19 on the carceral system and the role of the church in responding. Each week, this series will feature a variety of speakers focusing on the topics of criminal justice, disconnection, and the church.
We invite you to join the conversation live via Zoom on Tuesday evenings at 6 p.m. or through Westminster's Sunday morning adult education hour at 9:15 a.m., which will rebroadcast Tuesday's live session.
So each week, we're going to begin the sessions with a grounding exercise
to help bring us more fully into the present moment so that we may be open to all this time has to offer us, opening ourselves to challenging topics and changing hearts.
We are so glad that you have decided to join us today. So now we're going to begin to prepare for our grounding exercise. So again, my name is Gia Johnson, and I'm going to guide you through this grounding practice. So I'm going to invite you just to kind of get comfortable and settled in right wherever it is that you find yourself. For those that are able, I invite you to root your feet to the earth as if the earth is rising from beneath you. For others, you might want to imagine that your feet are rooted to the earth and imagine the earth rising from beneath you. Perhaps even get broad in your chest, maybe move your shoulders a bit, kind of just get a little bit relaxed and loosen up some. Begin to turn your attention and your awareness to your breath. Just begin to hear the sound of your breath. I invite you to inhale slowly and then exhale. Inhale slowly and then exhale. And do that one more time. Inhale and then exhale. So inhale what it feels like to be rooted and connected to life-giving community. Those communities that usher in wholeness and healing when harms have been committed. And exhale a desire for others to experience the peace of shalom that bears the fruit of compassion, healing, and wholeness. Inhale what it feels like to know God through the works of your justice making. Exhale your collective passions to be co-laborers with God in making justice for those whom have been made to be oppressed. Inhale what it feels like to bear witness to God doing a new thing in and through you and your community and in the world. And exhale a receiving of the invitation to be co-creators with God in making a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert. Begin to prepare yourself to be present for this conversation. Prepare your mind and your body and your spirit by gathering your desires for others to experience the peace of shalom, your collective passions to be co-laborers with God in justice making, and your invitation to be co-creators with God in imagining into existence new life-giving ways of being. So begin to, if your eyes are closed, I invite you to take a few more seconds And then begin to open your eyes. Begin to prepare your body and your mind and your spirit to be present for this conversation on this day at this time. Amen and Ashe.
So again, welcome everyone. I'm Gia Johnson. We're excited to have you here. So before we dive into our grounding practice, I want to just really invite us to kind of share in a few minutes of intentional silence in memory of the many lives that have been lost here in Chicago due to the recent incidents of gun violence, the loss of lives with police violence, and then just those loss of lives due to racialized violence. So if we could just kind of come together and just honor some time, just take a few seconds. Thank you. So I'll be guiding us through our grounding practice today and next week. I'll be using story to ground and center the conversation on real people who are experiencing incarceration right now. Over the next 2 weeks, I'll be sharing the works of 2 students who are in McCormick Solidarity Building Initiative at Cook County Jail. These two students have given us permission to read writing assignments on the topic of prison abolition and a new social order. So for this week, you all will get to know a little bit about Brandon Perkins. He is a bright, curious, and bold critical thinker and organizer. In the wake of COVID-19, he helped to organize a hunger strike at Cook County Jail to protest the conditions that they were experiencing. He also spoke to a group of academics offering higher education courses at the jail, stating that in the 4 years of his pretrial detention, he received a better education than the 4 years he spent in high school. So I want to just kind of invite you all to kind of just let that sink in for a little bit. You all can do that while we're doing the grounding practice. So if you all will just kind of settle into your space, wherever you find yourself, begin to bring your attention to your breath. Perhaps close your eyes and take 3 cleansing, settling in breaths. So you can just inhale. And then just exhale. Inhale. And then just kind of exhale whatever stressors that maybe you bring into this space today. And I'm going to go ahead and begin to read Brandon's work. Hello, everyone. My name is Brandon Perkins. I'm a pretrial detainee at Cook County Jail. And I have been here for 4.5 years awaiting trial, and I haven't been to court since February due to COVID-19. I'm being charged with 2 murders under the felony murder doctrine. Felony murder is a very old law adopted from our mother country, England, which abolished felony murder in the mid to late 1800s. Every day I watch the news here in Chicago and I see families seeking justice for some kind of harm inflicted to them or someone they love. In this archaic system of questionable police practices, suspicious grand jury indictments, extensive delays at the pretrial stage, and outdated laws targeted at specific demographics, do we even know what justice is anymore? More often than not, it seems like the harmed party will seek jail time, but separating somebody from society, incapacitation, does not equal justice. It only adds to the struggle of already broken homes and broken communities. I don't think this prison helps heal the wounds of those that have experienced harm. Prison time does not give back what was stolen or taken away. Prison does not help the drug addict seek recovery, and it does not allow the drug dealer to find another way to get by. Where is the justice in an eye for an eye system of reform? One person takes a life and the courts send the alleged person responsible to jail for life. A life for a life. Is incapacitation really the best form of justice that our society can come up with? I don't see how taking another person's life away can repair the harm. Taking this person away from their family, away from their community, only adds to the harm. I myself am a statistic of incapacitation. When I was 14 years old, my father was arrested and later sentenced to 23 years in federal prison for 4 ounces of crack cocaine. Now, the only way I can talk to my father is through a 3-way call on a day when we get lucky enough to call the same person at the same time. In my family, incapacitation has transcended generations, and I have only seen more harm. In my opinion, this is an injustice. Now, I might be a little tiny bit biased, but I believe prisons are the problem. Though not the only problem, police practices need to be guided by a higher moral compass. Indictments should be done openly. The pretrial stage should be handled expeditiously because justice delayed is justice denied. Statutory laws and sentences ranges need to be reviewed and updated. And most importantly, we need to come up with better ways to repair harm and restore justice, because incapacitation does neither. Thank you. I'm Brandon Perkins. So as we begin to prepare our minds, our bodies, and our hearts to be present for this conversation, I invite you to do so in light of Brandon's 3 questions and his invitation. Do we even know what justice is anymore? Where is justice in an eye for an eye system of reform? Is incapacitation or the restricting of individual freedoms and liberties when harms have been committed really the best form of justice that our society can come up with? And Brandon invites us to come up with better ways to repair harm and restore justice because incapacitation does neither. So if you have not already, begin to open your eyes and let us turn our attention to today's panelist. Nanette Banks and Tim Anderson will be up next to go ahead and introduce our panelists and our speakers.
Well, good evening. Glad to be here with each of you. I'm Reverend Nanette Banks, Vice President of Community Engagement and Alumni Relations at McCormick Theological Seminary, and I will be introducing 2 of our panelists for the evening. The first one is Mia Walker. Mia Walker is a social justice advocate and a prison abolitionist whose passion is addressing the intersectionality of race, class, gender, and reentry for incarcerated women and men. Currently, Mia is the Criminal Justice Manager of the Policy and Advocacy Division at Forward Justice. Forward Justice is a law, policy, and strategy center dedicated to advancing racial, social, and economic justice by partnering with human rights organizations at the forefront of social movements in the South. Mia's personal journey with the justice system was featured in the Christian Century in the Christianity Today in 2016. And so we welcome Mia. One of our other panelists is Tanya Hunsey. Tanya is a revolutionary mother, an incarceration survivor, and a community healer. As a longtime grassroots organizer, she has partnered with multiple organizations, including the Minnesota Prison Doula Project, the American Indian Prison Project Working Group, and the Minnesota Freedom Fund. She is a member of Minnesota's Department of Corrections Civil Engagement Committee and was appointed by the governor to the Minnesota Sentencing Guidelines Commission. And so tonight, we also welcome Tanya. Tim?
Thank you, Nanette. Tim Hart Anderson, the senior pastor at Westminster Presbyterian Church in Minneapolis, and I'm very pleased to have our church participating, our social justice forum and our adult education series in this conversation with some wonderful panelists and leaders and with my alma mater, McCormick Seminary, Chicago. I'm happy to introduce the next panelist, Quentin Williams. He's a field building project manager at Heartland Alliance and a part-time instructor and PhD student in sociology at Loyola University in Chicago. His research interests include the sociology of race and ethnicity, social inequality, and crime and punishment. Quentin works with the Restoring Rights and Opportunities Coalition of Illinois, RROCI, working with people with records and advocating for the expansion of their opportunities and for broader criminal justice reform in Illinois. He believes in the inherent worth of all people, the urgency of expanding opportunities for the most marginalized, and the paramount role of lived experience in creating strong and sustainable policies. Quentin currently holds an Associate in Arts from Malcolm X College, a bachelor's degree in sociology from Concordia University, Chicago, and a master's degree in sociology from Loyola University in Chicago. And now I'd like to introduce our moderator of the panel discussion today, Emily Baxter. Emily is the founder and executive director of We Are All Criminals, a catalyst for conversations about race, class, crime, privilege, punishment, and second chances. Through stories, statutes, and statistics, We Are All Criminals seeks to challenge concepts of criminality and justice. Prior to this, Emily served as the Director of Public Policy at the Council on Crime and Justice and as an Assistant Public Defender representing members of the Leech Lake and White Earth Bands of Ojibwe, charged with crimes in Minnesota State Court. She now lives in Durham, North Carolina, where she serves as the Director of the North Carolina Coalition for Alternatives to the Death Penalty, in recognition that our legal system will never be just so long as death is on the table. I'll turn it over to you now, Emily, for today's conversation.
Thank you, Tim. I am truly honored and humbled to be with you all here today. Thank you to Westminster and McCormick for creating this space in the ether for a very grounded conversation. For the past several months, a global pandemic has swept across the world like wildfire and found some of the most flammable land in our nation's jails and prisons. At a time when physical distancing, vigilant hand washing, and access to fresh air are not only important, but absolutely vital to surviving this virus, more than 2 million people in the United States are kept in cages, locked down, sleeping head to foot, where soap is overpriced or unavailable, and sanitizer is contraband. Tonight, we'll also be talking about another pandemic, racism in America, the criminalization of Black bodies, and the dehumanization and disregard of Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color embedded within our criminal legal system. Mia, I'd like to start with you. Here in North Carolina, thousands of people in custody have tested positive for COVID, and at least 26 people have died due to infection, including Ms. Faye Brown, a woman who spent 45 years in prison, and while eligible for parole, had been denied. You knew her and knew her well, and in an interview with the Marshall Project, you described Ms. Brown as quiet, prayerful, and generous. I am so sorry for your loss, Mia. You're also a true visionary, and now at Forward Justice, which has been at the front of groundbreaking changes here in North Carolina. Could you give us an overview of the virus behind bars, the landscape, litigation, and the broader movement?
So I kind of want to start out with like the factors that influence racial and ethnic minorities. So where we live, where we work, where we play contributes to our overall health, right? And I did some research. I wanted to go to the CDC and I wanted to contact some other people, specifically doctors in our state, to kind of highlight what is actually happening behind prison walls. One of the things that we were doing, and I was really proud for Justice once the pandemic hit, and we were, getting all of these massive emails from people who were specifically loved ones who were worried about their children, and they found their way to the News and Observer. So the News and Observer had created a space for people to actually just go on and share, like, because people wanted to know, like, what is happening with my daughter, what is happening with my son, what are we having visits anymore, and how do I keep in contact with my child other than just writing, and most of you may know, like, sometimes the phone system is incredibly costly, and so it was difficult for a lot of the loved ones to be able to reach out. So one of the things that Forward Justice did, we decided we wanted to band with other organizations to sign on to petition to our governor, Governor Cooper, to see if he would work with us to release some people. We advocated relentlessly, and we were constantly denied until we did a class action. And then once we started doing that, then things started to change. I will tell you that one of the things that I really loved is a couple of my sisters are I would say true abolitionists, and we were working around the clock. We were doing a lot of rallies, and we had the slogan was "Free her, free or free them all." And so we would go to the jail. We go to the jail every Friday. We have a rally. We do this specifically because we want our people that are behind the walls to know that we love them, whether they can come outside or not. Like, we wanted them to know that. And so when we started having the rallies and when we started having the petition and working with other coalition movement partners, we were just discovering the fact that people just didn't care, right? Like, and as much as our governor at the time, or still is, progressive, he wasn't moving. He wasn't trying to make any moves. So one of the things we did, we also did a rally with Judge Roser. We woke him up at 6 o'clock in the morning. So a bunch of my sisters got in their car, they drove around his house, and they blew the horn. And specifically, we wanted to make a point in saying, like, this is the time that our brothers and sisters across the state have to get up in the morning and have to deal with the horrific conditions, and no one is seeing them, no one is listening to them. And so we're going to do the same thing to you. So he actually, worked with us and we were able to pass that movement. But what I will tell you is that the most horrific thing is, I was making sure, one of my projects was to come in contact with our sisters and to make sure that they were okay and to find out what was happening. So I was getting in contact with loved ones because, family members were contacting us and they were like, our children are, I got a call from my child, she's crying. She was told that she couldn't take a shower, or she was told that they were washing all of their masks in the same communal sink. And I just want that to sit with you all for a minute. So, like, all of us, we go home, we have washing machines, you can wash your clothes, you can, do all these wonderful things. But I want you to think about the people behind the walls that don't have that freedom. And we're told that their masks were all going to be washed with everybody else's stuff. So these are other people there that are sick, that are having to deal with illnesses, that have no contact with their loved ones, and haven't had contact with their loved ones for a long time because of COVID, right? So they're not seeing their kids, they're not seeing their parents, and they're wondering about their own well-being. Like, am I next on the chopping block? Am I the next person that's going to die? Am I the next person that's going to come in contact with this illness? And what are people doing about it? And so, again, like I said, we advocated to the governor, and they were slowly releasing people. But what I would tell you is that there were a lot of people, there were a lot of men, and there were a lot of women that really tried to break out of prison because they knew they were going to die. One of our hot spots was Butner Federal Prison. And one of the guys saw a brother die. He was like, I'm not going to stay here because I know I'm next. And he fled. The other thing that we were doing is making sure, in terms of reentry, we wanted to make sure that our people were safe. And so we were working with other organizations that were providing funding to us to help place people in a safe space. So there was an opportunity that the governor did step in and say, yes, we want to, I hear you, I understand, I can't release everybody, but if their illness was serious, then yes, I'll release certain people and they can go home. The problem with that is that when we look at factors that influence racial and ethnic minorities, there are certain conditions that we're looking at, right? We're looking at where we live, where we work, where we play, and that overall contributes to our well-being and our health, right? But the big thing that I noticed as I was doing some research is that the health difference between racial and ethnic minority groups are often due to social and economic conditions. And these are more common among some racial groups and ethnic minorities than white people. And so when COVID-19 hit, it became such a public health emergency that these conditions contribute to the isolation of our folks. So not just those that were behind the walls, but when they were coming home, they felt isolated. There wasn't any support for them. There wasn't anybody to rally behind them and say, hey, we're going to make sure that you have X, Y, and Z. And so when you're looking at that as a whole, excuse me, we realized that there's a lot of work that needs to be done. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, not just inside the prison walls, but we really need to make sure that we take care of our people as they're walking out.
Thank you, Mia, and thank you for that truly chilling imagery. It's deeply disturbing. I want to point people to the chat function. If you're on the Zoom and have questions for the panelists, please feel free to use that. But until we move to Q&As, I'm going to go next to you, Quentin. I recently had the pleasure of reading your publication regarding phase 1 clinical trials and the frequency with which people described their experience as prison-like. I realize that's a massive oversimplification of your scholarship, but it made me wonder about your observations when the stay-at-home orders began rippling across the country, and the frequency with which people privileged in their ability to stay at home would liken their experience to incarceration. To that end, could you touch upon the realities of health and safety in the COVID era behind bars?
Thank you for that. When you kept referring to my scholarship, I was like, I'm wondering which. But so that was a really cool article that we did about phase 1 clinical trials. And yeah, I just want to just state very clearly and very bluntly that staying at home is very, 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 very different than being in prison. I just want to be absolutely clear. There's nothing eloquent or articulate or anything that I can say beyond that. I mean, it's not, hi, that's my daughter. It's not even close, really, to be honest. I remember, quite frankly, I was, much of my late teens, early 20s, I was under some type of correctional control. And I remember being in prison, dreaming that I could be locked up in some house on a couch, watching Netflix, Hulu, Prime Video, and all the stuff that I do now, you know? So it's definitely not the same. So just want to be clear about that. But also related to the conditions, I couldn't imagine being locked up right now during a global pandemic. Because prison by itself, without a global pandemic, is already unsanitary. We already knew this. It's already the officials that run the jail are already dismissive of the concerns of the individuals that are on the inside. The healthcare is already poor. Okay, like those things already existed prior to COVID-19, right? There are already people dying in prison, right? So we're paying a lot of attention to people dying in prison because of COVID, but people die in prison every day for things that perhaps had they had the adequate health care and had they been able to be on the outside, they would have been able to live. So all of those things already were there, right? The conditions were already there. The lack of humanity being shown to individuals is already there. And I just want to be very clear about that, that this is not anything different. What I do like about COVID-19 is because I just feel like people are actually listening for once, but people have been talking about prison conditions for quite some time. But then when we start talking about the conditions and people are listening, and then we go back to these old tropes about public safety and threats to safety with regards to releasing people, right? To try to protect them as best we can from COVID-19. So, you know, the decarceration effort here in Illinois, you know, it's been rife with problems. They did some things, but a report was just released recently for here in Illinois that it showed that with the releasees that were released due to COVID-19, they were overwhelmingly white, right? And I think in part, that's because there's this underlying cultural assumption, A, about what it means to be a person with a record, But then when you add on top of that Blackness, right, because this is anti-Blackness that we're seeing, then the people who supposedly pose a threat are being left inside of these inhumane spaces just to die without regard. But what I want everybody to know that's listening, that they've already treated us like that prior to COVID. And COVID is just, in many ways, exacerbating the issue and minimally just shining a light on an issue that already existed. So if you all are like upset about like the way people are being treated in prisons because of COVID, well, you should be. It's nothing new, and that's how we've been doing punishment in prison in this country, period.
Thank you for that, Mr. Williams. I think quite a few of the themes that you touched upon are a nice segue to what I want to talk to you about, Tanya. In a recent report by the Prison Policy Initiative, perhaps you saw this. In a recent report by the Prison Policy Initiative, Minnesota was one of 9 states to receive a D- regarding the state's response to COVID-19 in jails and prisons. Every other state got an F. Since the report was published, however, 2 people in the Faribault Correctional Facility have died due to COVID, and who knows how many others are not just infected, but symptomatic. You have been calling for structural changes in the system for years that could have, I would imagine, in many ways prevented this. Could you talk about the relationship between the health and safety and mass incarceration, and why decarceration isn't happening at the rate necessary to protect people?
Yeah, I can. I also wanted to, after I seen that report, I had to go through and go, why are we receiving a D-? Because we haven't had any de-incarcerations happening on a state level at all. I do know that one of our biggest counties, Ramsey County, when it was at the height, so I would say beginning of March, we were getting calls. I got calls from the county attorney from Ramsey and was like, what can we do? We need help. We need to release people. And we worked really closely with Ramsey County and the systems people in Ramsey County, and we're able to half the population, not just of the jail, but also the workhouse within about a week and a half. And I'm going to attribute that to why we might have gotten a D-, because on the other hand, when it came, community was ready. We were on the ground. Let's do this. We need to get our people safe. I'll be, completely transparent here. When this was happening in the beginnings, I was like, yes, this is what we need. We're going to be able to turn this around. We're going to be able to show the world that we do not need to incarcerate. That incarceration does not mean public safety. They don't go hand in hand. That doesn't mean someone being incarcerated does not mean that they weren't safe to be in the community, in the United States anyways. What it means is that they did something that has been criminalized, and society sees fit that they need to be punished. So it's not about rehabilitation. It's not about public safety, whether they're safe inside. We're not seeing any of that. And so I was very hopeful. I mean, so much so I'm like, okay, we're going to find a place for people to go. We're going to be able to move through this. Also really excited because we were able to get a pregnant person out of prison within a week. And it was just a phone call where we called and said, we need to get her out. She's going to give birth. She cannot go back and it happened. And I was like, hitting the ground running, like it's on. The time that we've been waiting for is here. We're going to get people out. We're going to get them free, and we're going to be able to move forward, and it's going to be the push. And it hasn't been that. From that point, we were stopped. It was okay. They're going to put a bill through, and we're going to do a special session, and we're going to be able to incarcerate people who have 180 days or less, we'll be able to get them out and they can be in the community, and we'll, you know, the community we push for, well, now we need resources for people for us to be able to take them. If you're not spending money on them inside, we should be able to have the resources. They should have the resources out here to make sure that they're housed, at least housed. And it became very apparent that our people in power don't care if people die if they're in prison. They don't care if they're safe if they're in prison. And it was literally, I can remember being on the phone with our commissioner and with people and just saying, people are going to die and nobody cares because they're incarcerated, because their lives don't matter. And this isn't something new, like Quentin said, isn't something new. It's never mattered. If someone's inside those walls, they're not worthy of living in most people, what people think. That's what people think. It's out of sight, out of mind. And let them die because, and we've seen it, you see it comments from people, well, they shouldn't have been in prison anyways. Yep, they did the crime, so who cares if they die? These are family members. These are my people. These are my sisters and my brothers and sons and daughters of people. And we're not getting it. We're not moving forward anymore. So I was, again, really surprised that we got a D- because the next phase was, well, we're going to do conditional medical release. That was the Department of Corrections' big, savior. Well, and we're going to have everybody apply for conditional medical release. We kind of stood back and, a couple people from Mitchell Hamlin Law School were like, well, I said, how are they going to be able to handle all these applications? Who's going to be watching to make sure that people are getting released? Who's going to be looking at racial and gender and all of these things to make sure who's getting released and that is what's happening here? And after 3 weeks after the application had been released, we waited 3 weeks for it to get released, and then it was released, and there had been three people that were accepted and that had been released at that time. Now we're up to, I think, 15, maybe. They have one person looking at those applications, one person going through thousands of applications to free people. And now we are at the place where one of our state facilities has over 200 positives, 2 deaths, and there's still no push. There's still no push. And it's like, we're seeing the same thing. It's like, how do we have to stop talking about building better prisons, getting better healthcare in prisons. What we need to be saying is, how do we keep people in the community? Because they're not going to get that in prison. We will never in this country have the cultural change where it's going to be in a rehabilitative situation. It's so ingrained in this country. I had the privilege to go to Norway a year ago and go to the prisons there and really be able to look at the healthcare, look at what's happening there. And I've come back from that and had many people say, well, what are 3 things that we could do here? And I just have to set them back and say, it's not 3 things. It's an actual culture change. They want to treat people like good neighbors because they want good neighbors. They're going to give them good healthcare because they're human beings. We don't have that in the United States. We treat people like animals, and then we're surprised when they act like animals, and they don't deserve health care because they did something that doesn't follow in the constructs of what we call a society. This is what we're supposed to be doing. When we look that, then we started to separate, well, they're nonviolent drug offenders and violent offenders. We're going to separate those. Well, there's no separation there. Because people come to a place of violence because they're surviving, because they've been through so much trauma, right? And we have to continue to repeat this over and over and stop separating people by what their criminalization is. I especially look at women, and we see all the health issues that happen with women due to incarceration. And it happens to our brothers just the same. I just know I can speak on my own situation. And it's not just the healthcare that we don't get while we're inside. It's the healthcare once we leave the doors, once we go back to community. We're still not supported. We're still seeing, still not being able to get the medications that we want. You can go into a hospital. I went to a hospital emergency room when I was been in a motorcycle accident, and they pull up your record and see, oh, well, you've had a record, so we're not going to give you pain medication. So it's so deeply ingrained in, again, it's not about building better prison systems. It's not about how do we help people, have better health care in prison. It's no, how do we keep our people in the community? How do we bring them back? It's easy to look at the system and what the system is or isn't doing, but that's just pushing away our own responsibility. It's what are we as people doing when are we relying on this system, this unjust system, if a harm happens to us? Are we pushing these people away when they come out? Or are we stepping up and stepping around them? So yeah, that report was very interesting, and we were to see that we were, well, top D-. I don't know how top that can be, but still, when you look at it, it's like, oh, well, how systems will, oh, well, at least we're not an F- like these other ones. But we haven't seen where they should be getting any accolades.
Mia, I'm going to turn back to you, and I'd like to talk a little bit about the community at home that Tanya mentioned. 5 days ago, and due to years of advocacy from leaders such as yourself, Governor Cooper signed into law the Second Chance Act. Congratulations. Could you talk a bit about the act, where it fits in the world of reentry, and what coming home looks like in this COVID world?
So we had an action the other day. Governor Cooper signed the Senate Bill 562, and this was primarily like an expunction bill for those that have had like the littlest minor thing on their record. I don't know why it took him that long to get here, but hallelujah, it's a win. And we celebrated a really good group of people that I know were super excited about it. I called a ton of people beforehand just to let them know. And a lot of them were like, stop kidding. Like, we've been watching this for like 5 to 6 years now, Mia, like really don't be playing this game with us. But they passed it and it was really great. I mean, and I will say it was bipartisan, like everybody, conservatives, everybody across the board were like, yes, we need to do this. But what I will say is, as much as I was very excited, there's always going to be somebody that throws shade. I had posted it on my LinkedIn page, and then people were posting, they were saying, congratulations, this is great. Can you like send us a copy of the bill? And then someone said, well, why don't you just let them all out? I was like, exactly. Yes, we should. But you're still going to get people that are biased and have their reservations. But what I will say, it frees up a lot of people that really have just like 1 or 2 on their record are able to get that completely expunged. The relief for that is obviously it goes way deeper. The fact that you no longer have to, when you want to go visit your kids at school, you have the right to go visit your kids at school, right? You don't have to have a permission slip or a letter. For those of you that don't know that, like if you have kids and you have a criminal record and you want to go in and bring them cupcakes and, have a birthday party, like you're not allowed to do that in our state if you have a criminal record. And I'm very serious about that. It's sad. And I want you to think about if it's your child and your child is begging you to come and you can't come and they're the only kid there, that their mom or their dad is not there because they have a criminal record and they have a charge that was over 10 years ago. So something as easy as that was like really great to be able to see that. And again, we still have a lot of work to do, but I'm very proud of the progress that we've made. And I'm very excited for those that really now have the freedom to live their life at the fullest now because their record can be expunged.
Thank you for that. Mia, do you want to touch on what coming home looks like in the COVID world?
Whew. Coming home. So for a lot of our people, coming home is not what you would think it should be. COVID is really, oh gosh, how do I even say this? COVID has caused a lot of hurt, a lot of damage to a lot of families. When you let me back up a bit. So let's say, for example, you've got Kathy. Kathy's getting ready to walk out the door. She's super excited. She's been incarcerated for 5 years. And I want you to think about going home. And most people, when they're going home, like their family, their loved ones are there. They have everything that they need. Everything is great. And their transition to home has been really smooth. But when you're looking at COVID, I want you to think about our brothers and sisters that are currently incarcerated. Let's say a couple of them are going to be released and they're coming out. They don't have any medication, like whatever medication they're on, they don't have that medication. Why? Because the prison is not going to pay for that anymore. Like those funds that were back in the day, like I had asthma, so I had my asthma medication. They used to give you 3 months supply as you're walking out the door. You do not get that anymore. You just walk out with whatever you have. And if you only have that 1 bottle of your asthma medication, that's all you're going to get. Now, we all know that medication is very costly depending on what type of illness that you have. I have a sister that is currently inside, and we've been fighting for her to be released, and she has COPD. I heard that was a very serious illness. And when she walks out, she actually immediately has to go to the hospital because she needs to have surgery. DPS is not paying for her surgery. DPS could care less about whether she, her health issues and conditions and wanted to cough out that money. They're not going to do that. They'll be glad to release her because as long as they don't have to pay, right? And so I want you to think about when you guys are thinking, when people are saying, I want to come in and I want to do work with prisoners, or I want to volunteer and be in the prison. I always tell people, you need to be educated about what you're about to say. Like when you say, I want to go in, I specifically love this with our faith community. I just want to go in and love on the prisoners. And I'm like, okay, first of all, let's not use that word. Can you say you want to go in and you want to love on my brothers and sisters? Can we take out like, I want to love on the prisoner, because that's not who I am, right? That's not who they are. Like we need to see people as people. Jesus said, this is Mia, this is my child, I love her. It's the same thing for everybody else. So that's one thing that we need to do. But when you're looking at it, in terms of people being released, and we're looking at COVID-19, and we're looking at the damage that this pandemic has already created, and families that are already overwhelmed and stressed out because their child are incarcerated and they're trying to figure out, like, is my child going to die? I'm calling the governor, I'm calling the lieutenant governor, I'm calling Forward Justice, I'm calling Emancipate NC, I'm calling all of these coalition people because I need to know that my child is going to live another day or that my child can come home. So the reality is, not just for the individual that's trying to transition out, I want you to think about the weight that it has on the loved ones that are waiting for their child. I also want you to think about the pain and anguish of those that we leave behind. Those that we know that have a life sentence that are never going to get out. I mean, they could, don't get me wrong, because, I pray to Jesus every day. So I know my father is, he is the father. I know that he has to answer. And if that happens, then that happens. But I also want you to think about all of the complexities about someone walking out the door when they've been incarcerated for 5 or 10 or 15 years and don't have any of the things that they need because the prison system's like, I'm not going to pay anything extra for you to walk out the door. If you're free, you're free. So whatever medication you have is whatever medication you have. If you're unable to see your child, that's on you. We're not going to make any other concessions for you to bring your family back in where you used to have family visitation. We're not worried about that. The other thing that we learned is that the mask that they were giving our sisters, our brothers and sisters, actually, it was also in the men's facility as well. We learned that they were washing all their masks in a communal sink together. So instead of like whether you and I could go to CVS and get a box of masks and we can, put it on, wear it, toss it the next day. They were literally putting them all together. Mind you, a sister was already being isolated for COVID. So we're talking about health issues. We're talking about, this is a population that is the most invisible. And it grieves me to my very soul. Like I knew coming on to this webinar, I was like, I told myself 1,000 times earlier today, do not cry, do not cry, do not lose it, don't get angry, don't get hostile, do not cry. But I can't help but not to hold the stories. I hold the stories for my sisters because I know that nobody else is going to want to remember them, right? I hold their pain, I hold their stories, I grieve with them, I pray with them. I still love them no matter where they are, even if they don't ever come out. My heart and soul is dedicated to the people that I lived with. And to me, I consider that a gift and a blessing. Was it hard to be incarcerated? Absolutely. I'm not going to sit here and lie and exaggerate like, oh, yeah, it was great. But I lived with women that literally took care of me when I came in. And so I made the decision that I wanted to do the same thing, which is why we fight so hard for our people, and we continue to fight for them as they're transitioning out. But what I would tell you, in the midst of COVID, it is the most isolating event and pandemic that you could possibly ever imagine. Even when they are being released, we have been sheltering people across the state, right? So some of them are not even at home with their family yet, but at least they're in a safe space, and we know that they're having food, they're having clothing, they're getting their medication, they're being treated. We're making sure that they have exactly what they need. And I know it's hard for them because they're still not with their kids, they're still not with their loved ones, but at least we know that they're safe, right? We have put them in a location where we know that they're safe. But the isolation and the trauma is debilitating. So for the faith community, this is what I'm asking all of you, is I really need you to step up. I know that there's some faith leaders that are still on the fence. And for me, I don't even understand what that means. What do you mean you're on the fence? These are God's children. We're here to serve. God called you to serve. It's as simple as that. And so for us, we need to step up to the plate. We need to do more. We need to advocate more. It does not cost you anything to go and write a letter, to go to your governor's office, to go see the lieutenant governor, to reach all these people, all the politicians. It doesn't cost you anything to do that. And why, for the love of God, I don't understand why some, and this is not for all of you, I just want you to understand, there are some faith leaders out there that just don't see the point. And right now where we are, this is the most important point that we could ever have in this conversation. I need you guys to step up. I need you not to just go and like, I'm going to pray for you, I'm going to visit you. Like, I need you to be intentional in changing the narrative and changing the game for our people. It's time to fight. It's time to be on the front lines. It's time for you to pick up that mantle and say, okay, yes, I'm with you. That is my request. Love you.
Thank you for that, Mia. That call to the faith community to step up, to demand action, I think is absolutely key. And it transitions nicely to what I want to ask of Quentin and Tanya next. Quentin, I'll start with you. Just briefly, what is your call to action? What would you like people on the call now and listening in later to do? How can they support you?
Wow. So there's a lot that can be done. I think the campaign that I lead, the campaign to end permanent punishments, and what we're calling permanent punishments, I put the report that we just came out with yesterday into the chat box, where we define what we mean by permanent punishments. But just really quickly, I'll tell you, it's essentially the prison after the prison, right? The material structure of the prison, and people are behind bars. What this campaign is seeking to do is to eliminate the barriers that are codified in law that then put chains on people long after their sentence, in the form of denials to housing, denial to employment, denial to licensing, denial in education. So that is, in a nutshell, what the campaign is seeking to do. One thing you can do is get involved with the campaign. Email me, qwilliams@heartlandalliance.org, and I can let you know how to plug in. Number two, if you are an Illinois resident, you can first and foremost learn who is your state representative, who is your state senator, who are the power brokers that are supposedly representing you. These people, once you have identified them, you can, as a constituent, reach out to them and say, hey, what are you doing about this particular issue? What are you doing? Because they told us, and us meaning me and some of my colleagues, that because of the pandemic, they we're not going to introduce any criminal justice reform bills this year. So because I heard even someone said something along the lines of criminal justice reform fatigue. And I was like, oh, really? You're tired. We're tired. So I just want you all to really think about how you as a citizen can hold the people accountable who are supposedly representing you and representing the people. Because quite frankly, there's a big disconnect between the power brokers that create laws that then put us in chains for the rest of our lives, often or indefinitely, and the people. And the people, what we want is to work, what we want is to have adequate housing, what we want is just what anybody else wants. We want to be fully free. So those two things are two just low hanging fruit, but also there's tons of work being done already in Illinois, in Chicago in particular, but across the country. So really, I think there's an education piece that needs to happen, because as Tanya so eloquently pointed out earlier, it's that there's a cultural assumption about what it means to be a person with a record. So I want you all to know also, as I conclude, is that 3.3 million people in the state of Illinois have a criminal record, which means that there are quite a few people. So when you say things like people deserve it, or they shouldn't have done, or they shouldn't have, and whatever, right? I want you to really think about what we're actually doing to keep people safe, right? Because all of this harsh punishment and the punishment after the punishment is all in the name of public safety. But in fact, we are undermining public safety by keeping people out of things that contribute to human flourishing. So I would say, one, contact me if you want to get involved with the campaign. Two, get to know your elected officials and hold them accountable and let them know that they think that you think this is important, because they don't think it's important, such that they can tell us they're not doing any criminal justice reform bills, but they have time enough to do a penalty enhancement. So I just really want to stress the idea of how important it is to hold the elected officials accountable. And then lastly, do a little bit of education about abolition, prison abolition. It sounds scary. What are we going to do without jails? What are we going to do without police? Well, I would recommend a book, Beyond Survival. It's a good book. There are plenty authors that have laid out the groundwork for what it might look like without prisons and what it might look like without police. And if you think that this is a new idea, just look up Angela Davis and see how new this idea is. Thank you.
Are Prisons Obsolete is one of the greatest texts ever written. And Tanya, and Tanya, if you can close us out, give us your action steps. How can people get involved? What do you want people listening in now and listening in later to do?
Find formerly incarcerated people that are doing the work and support them. There's some brilliant and amazing people throughout this country and nationwide that are doing and leading some major changes in building community. You know, I just want to say, you know, when we talk about prison abolition, it can be such a scary thing for people to hear, and what they think, what automatically comes to them is the tearing down and the tearing down. But there's another side to abolition, and that's the building, and you can be a part of that. That's where I've been able to focus my energy on for the last couple of years, is building something new, building that new world. And if you're in Minneapolis, we have a lot of things that are happening right now. We're opening up the first women's reentry housing, and it's not just about reentering in a social service model. It's actually empowering and giving space to women and children that are coming out of incarceration. And how can we build people power? How can we start to build that community that we need? We're also doing some really great policy, the primary caregiver bill, which will require courts to do community alternatives instead of incarceration if you're a primary caregiver of a minor child. And another great one is the Healthy Start Act. And that is, if a pregnant person or a young mother is sent to prison, they will be furloughed to a community alternative. And so we are essentially ending incarceration for birthing people in Minnesota. And we're going to push that through because we want to end family separation. We want to end the trauma that the children and parents are going through being separated. Because I think that people don't really understand that. They don't understand the depth of that pain of being separated from your child due to incarceration. I think that people really think that, well, they don't really want to be a mom. They don't really deserve to be a mom. But I can tell you from my own experience, it was the most intense and longest lasting trauma that I've ever experienced, is being separated from my children. And it doesn't just go away. You know, that's the other thing that I want people to understand, is that it's not just incarceration trauma that we're dealing with. The longest lasting trauma that I feel still every day is reentry trauma, because I don't know where I belong in the community. So because I don't know where I belong, I'm trying to build a new community where my sisters and brothers that are coming out have a home, and we can start to build that power and be able to build collective wealth, collective power, collective change for our people.
Tanya, as always, thanks for all of the hard work that you do. And it sounds like there are a lot of footholds there for people to be able to join in and to lift you up and support you in the work that you're doing. I believe that everybody has bios for Quentin, Tanya, and Mia, and you can read more about the organizations that they work with and some of the extraordinary work that they're doing. And I would encourage everyone to learn more and to support them. We're going to turn now back to, there you are. Hi, Amanda. Hey, Gia. I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Emily. Thank you for such fantastic navigation of really difficult topics, and to all of our panelists. We could just talk all night, I think. I know we're having some issues with the question function, and so I hope that if you do have questions, that you'll maybe send those via email, that this is a conversation that we can stay engaged with. So, Gia?
Yes, thank you, Emily, Tanya, Mia, Quentin. Thank you so much for everything. I'm just gonna leave you all with some take action today steps, and we'll also send all of this in an email as well, along with links to all of the bios and the websites and the work of each of the panelists. So here in Chicago locally, there'll be about 3 different actions or events that will take place over 4th of July weekend. So we have Bless the Block, formerly incarcerated Independence Day is happening on Friday, July 3rd. And then My Block, My Hood, My City has some grant money available for folks who want to do some activities over this weekend. And then of course, support Illinois Coalition of Higher Ed. They're going to be having a summer action. And then last is that we, the Solidarity Building Initiative, started a pen pal community so that you can sign up and be paired with one of the students at the Cook County Jail. So you'll have a link to be able to sign up and do that in the follow-up email. And then if you want to stay connected with the work, feel free to follow McCormick Solidarity Building Initiative on Facebook. It's all you, Amanda.
Great, just to say thank you so much, and we hope you'll join us next week. We'll be diving deeper into one conversation with Dr. Jenny McBride. We'll be looking at criminal justice from a theological perspective, so we'll get a little deeper into the connection of the criminal justice system and the church. So we hope to see you next week at the same time. If you enjoyed tonight's conversation, please encourage folks to watch the rebroadcast of it, which will happen this Sunday morning, 9:15 a.m., and that's accessible on Westminster's live stream. I can put that in the chat here, but this is westminstermpls.org. So see you then, and have a wonderful evening.
Thanks, everybody. And thanks
you
for the invite.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
being here.
Blessings.
Thank you, everyone, for coming.